Happy 23 June 2023. I'm currently in the city of Shoreline, which is like northern suburbs of Seattle. This land used to actually be Seattle in my lifetime till it seceded. And so it's the northern hemisphere. It's summer here, and I know I'm wearing this. I like this sweater, so I'm wearing it. Okay, so I'm going to talk about implementing a self-ban in sports. I'm going to work through three examples that I've used on myself. One, a successful implementation, one, an ongoing implementation, and one, a relatively new implementation. So that's the introduction. First, general rule of thumb for any ban: use on oneself before implementing on someone else to prevent inhumane treatment of those being banned. The world would not be in the state it is in today, I would guess, if people actually used the bans they use on other people on themselves first. I'm just going to put it that way. A second general rule of thumb for a self-ban: for optimal results, no outsourcing of any part to anyone else. So, like, not being like, hey, you, friend, if I do blank, can you cut me off and say don't do that? No. I have found for optimal success, and like I'm talking like bans that last over 10 years, over a decade, closer to 2 decades, doing it oneself, it might struggle at first, like doing it oneself, but it actually, there's adaptation to being able to do it oneself. So if one really wants to, like, quote unquote get ahead, do it oneself. Okay. All right, let's going to start with the first example of, or my example of a successful implementation. That was horseshoe throwing. It lasted approximately 15 to 20 years. Ended Wednesday, 24 May 2023, Seattle time. Terms and conditions of this ban was no touching a horseshoe used for horseshoe throwing. Only return if it feels right. So this was largely the terms and conditions I developed in response to horseshoe throwing. It was kind of a big deal in my family and was kind of like a fad thing for a while. And there was a bunch of like peer pressure or like, just throw a horseshoe. But then, you know, they would, when I threw a horseshoe, I wasn't very good at it. So then people would kind of be like, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I'm like, stop telling me how I need to improve. I didn't want to throw the horseshoe in the first place. So I was like, you know what? I'm just not gonna do it. Okay. Overcoming the peer pressure. And then evaluations of effectiveness. It was a complete success. Surprised myself that I felt good when I returned. I would say there was some really negative mental health space there around horseshoe throwing, and I had my I had my iPhone XS Neutrino Gold, this filming device, and there were critters like wildlife, and like workers around, but like it was me just throwing a horseshoe kind of thing. Okay. Next one, ongoing implementation. So that's one I started a while ago, depending on one's definition of a while. I started a few years ago, so this is going to be frisbee. I started in 2015, a calendar system, so I don't actually have the exact start date. So like it started in the year 2015. A calendar system as in whatever calendar system I'm on. Okay, terms and conditions of this one: no throwing a frisbee, pretty self-explanatory. Come up with a return condition only if it feels right. So like with horseshoe throwing, it was kind of like, well, horseshoes have been in my life and stuff, so in theory I could go help out at my sister's barn and throw a horseshoe, you know, kind of thing. But so there was frisbee is not something that has normally been in my life, so there's a little bit of, why am I returning to it if it's not necessarily something, I mean, like the biggest case of frisbee in my life would be like throwing it for dogs, pets, right? But not for myself, right? There's a difference between, so like throwing a frisbee for a frisbee, right? No throwing a frisbee, like as opposed to like no playing with the dogs, you know? So what would be my condition to returning? So then, no throwing a frisbee for, no. I think that's clear. I'm going to leave it in the video description. It's not wording. Okay, evaluations of effectiveness. Successful thus far, and peer pressure from others has subsided. I live in Washington State. Pacific Northwest has a very notorious ultimate frisbee culture. And so there was a bit of, especially in college, want to go throw a frisbee? Want to play ultimate frisbee? And it would, like, my answer was always no. So it was one of those ones where peer pressure was just like, not only is it a no, but why do I keep being asked? And they'd be like, oh, when you're an athlete, it translates great to ultimate frisbee. And it's just like, no means no, stop asking, you know, kind of thing. If applicable, come up with a return condition. Too much peer pressure still makes me want to not return. All right, so there are return conditions sometimes, and the next one perhaps is the biggest one, or it kind of helps with that. If applicable, come up with a return condition. So if I do want to return to throwing frisbees, why? I pose that to myself to like, as a, do you remember the mental and the like kind of health that came with this, and like the peer pressure, like talking to myself. So why do I want to return? Making sure I don't go that way again. All right, and then up last, the third one I'm talking through is new implementation. So this is swimming. Started on Thursday, 25 May 2023, Seattle time. This one is a case of I keep oscillating back and forth with swimming. So you know what? It's time to implement a self-ban. If I can't commit to a course of action, just do that. Okay, the terms and conditions of this one is pretty extensive. These are also, so they're terms and conditions, but for this one I actually have explicit return conditions as well. So no submersion in water above my knees except bathtubs. Strictly enforce personal and bodily safety / security in all aspects of my life. I'm a sexual assault victim multiple times, so this is something I could work on anyway. Erase everything my coaches taught me, like a cleanse of sorts. Like, I sought enough help that it kind of like started like colliding with what I learned from one coach would like collide with what I learned from another. So just kind of like be like, I've taught swim lessons, I've coached and stuff, like, and I learned stuff for myself. Like, let's try and focus on that, because I do that for running and it works well. And like my coaches will in that sport, like I didn't really listen. I did one season of track and field and didn't really listen to the coach because my anatomy was a bit different than the other runners and stuff. And so the stuff they would tell the normal runners to do didn't really work for me, or it would hurt to run kind of thing. So taking that approach, being like, maybe I should just have my own stuff. All right. Here are the return conditions. Only return if no underwater footage is collected at the competitions I want to compete at. Have been assaulted due to people watching such footage of me in the past. Okay, like I just know. Only return if there is a culture change in the sport and corresponding press coverage to getting the distance of 1 mile. Right, so that's 5,280 feet, 1,760 yards, approximately 1,609 meters. Currently, there's not really a commitment to metric accuracy. And as a scientist, I care. Most people care about that stuff, especially the departments of transportation. Okay. Only return if a no-touching clause is incorporated to reflect my history of being physically and sexually assaulted. So I was, I think the worst Olympic Games for me to watch was the 2012 Summer Olympic Games, when like all of the female swimmers were hugging after the end of a relay, and I was like, I don't want to be touched. I've been raped. Right? That's just as bad as being raped. So I was like, I got really depressed after those Olympic Games. That was the case where the Olympic Games and like the touching of the athletes of each other on the same relay time, where I was like, I don't want to be alive, right? Like it was so depressing. Still is. I don't really watch that stuff for a reason, you know. I like individual races, but not all. That was the United States of America. The United States of America is known as being kind of overly handsy between the swimmers, and so yeah. But just okay. Only return if there are non-age bracketed senior-only competitions I am eligible to compete in, including ones banning current and former junior competitors. Gotta be inclusive of all ages at some point in time. Maybe that requires an entirely new governing body for aquatic sports and swimming. Right, these return conditions might not be satisfied, in which case I might not return to swimming. Just make an entirely new governing body for everybody, right? As opposed to like really divisive age competitions by World Aquatics / FINA and LEN and stuff. Like they already have a bunch of stuff going on, so maybe let them focus on what they focus on and introduce a new governing body that focuses on everyone, right? And including all countries, which those organizations do not do currently. It is 23 June 2023. Okay. So maybe we just need not a new governing body. What I'm trying to say is maybe we need an additional governing body. All right, evaluations of effectiveness might become stricter, might become less strict, might stay the same. So sometimes when I implement these self-bans, the rules, so to speak, change. Typically they have become stricter. I feel like these are pretty strict rules. So there's like, it might become stricter. I don't really know how that would happen. Might become less strict. Like maybe I want to go swimming in the ocean, just like if I'm at the beach, right? Or maybe I want to go up to my waist, you know, okay. But it might stay the same. I might decide not to do that kind of thing. I haven't gone swimming at a beach since like 2014. Okay. For real. Okay. Evaluations of effectiveness. So that was the first one. Second one, we shall see. I hope it is successful. Still requires intentional effort for me, especially the bodily safety and security. Yeah. Okay. This is really about healing and recovering from being assaulted and stuff like that, and not putting myself in a situation that's high risk, right? Putting my body on display. When that came into play in the past. And like there was somebody in another lane who reached over and tried to grope me when I was swimming one time. Like so the sport itself is not, for me, there's like a bunch of trauma with the sport. So there's like, I don't really want to return. And there's no really dedication to cleaning that kind of behavior up, especially at the highest level. So like, yeah, it still requires effort for me. But there's a collision course there where swimming and like me being assaulted or people attempting to assault me have actually, like, this is stuff like real life issues I need to work through. And that means just kind of dropping swim. Yeah. All right. What seems to work for being successful? Super strict enforcement of terms and conditions in gray, not well-defined areas. So if I'm like on the border between should I do this or should I not do this, set as a rule. In my experience, if I set it as a rule, do not do blank, if on the edge, it's been entirely successful, at least thus far. Right. So that's my, speaking from my experience, I don't know if I would call it a tip because people are very different. So that might not work for somebody else whatsoever. They may revert on themselves, go back on what they said, kind of thing. Revert here not meaning the, like, going to Islam, right? That word has multiple meanings. Okay, conclusion. In the words of 1996 and 2000 Olympian Josh Daniels, he signed this Speedo postcard I got from him, or not just Daniels, sorry, I have a friend named Josh Daniels, Josh Davis. So I got this like approximately 20 years ago, and it says, to Tanis, do your best, and then he signs his name, Josh Davis. Wife Chantel, father to Caleb, Abby, and Luke, and he was American record holder in the 200-meter freestyle. Co-captain at the 2000 Olympic men's team, which is like the 2000 Summer Olympic Games in Sydney, Australia. And then there was the 1996, what would that be, Atlanta Games. Triple gold medalist at the 1996 Atlanta Games. Double silver medalist at the 2000 Sydney Games. Yeah, so listening to him, follow my heart. I want to run. If I get only one say, and like I only get one sport to like go all in on, it's running for me. So yeah, happy viewing.